No.
They're still in the hallway.
I don't know.
Quite a few people out there.
Oh, but we're good.
I'm very new.
Yeah.
That would be me.
Yeah, that's what I want. I appreciate it.
Any member of the audience would like water? Since there's only a given amount of this.
I used the plan and I was like, how did that result in I'm amending it.
We'll just hand out water. It's a little warm in here.
Thank you so much. No. Emily,
Are we ready? Bridget, are we ready to do Zoom?
We are ready whenever you are, Jen.
Do we have our online commissioners?
Yes.
We do.
We are going back into open session at this time, taking up item 13. Why don't you, Director, cue this up for us?
Certainly. So the board had an opportunity just now to go into closed session to hear legal advice on this matter from the city attorney's office. Going back into open session, I think it'd be appropriate, we're back for item 13 to hear from the sponsor of this item from the Common Council, Alderman Alex Brower. Good evening, Alderman.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Fire and Police Commission, for hearing this item. I really do appreciate it. So this is a motion in the Common Council. As you guys said, under Act 12, that allows by a 2/3 vote to modify police standard operating procedure. This motion modifies, it's a motion modifying police department procedure 460, use of force. And so this assigns a duty to intervene in situations where a department member observes another department member or a member of any other law enforcement agency using excessive force. And what this is coming from here is what we've seen in other cities, Minneapolis, Chicago, other cities, Los Angeles, where ICE agents are using unreasonable, excessive, and what is the phrase here from the Supremacy Clause? They have definitely done more than what was necessary and proper for them to do under the Supremacy Clause in the United States Constitution. And so we are attempting to codify here a procedure, or modify this procedure, to create a standard where officers will do something when ICE agents act out of, in some cases, complete malice towards residents, immigrants, and people and bystanders and protesters. Additionally, what this calls on them to do is to report non-compliant uses of force as well, regardless of agency. Regardless of the agency as well. And so in your file, there are 3 versions of this. There's the original version, there's sub A, there's sub B. Minor modifications were made in all of these to clarify concerns brought by the city attorney's office, but the main idea still stands in all versions. Right now we're moving forward ahead with sub B, but the concern is the main point still stands with all versions, that they will intervene in cases where the observing officer, based on their training, believes or knows to be that beyond which is objectively reasonable actions by any law enforcement officer, including federal ones. So that's what we're intending to do with this motion.
We have a representative of the police department here, Heather Hawk. Would you like to
Yes, thank you, Commissioners, and good evening. Heather Huff, Chief of Staff, Milwaukee Police Department. I do want to say Chief Norman did and would have liked to be here because this is a very important file. It is his birthday today, and so the missus and his children did have long-standing plans. So he does send his regrets, and we would like to say just a few words. I've met with Alderman Brower on a number of different occasions, and the other alders, the chief included, about their ice out, or the ice out package. And we have been very supportive of the intent of that legislative packet. I want to put on the record that we worked with the alders on an SOP change, making it explicit that our officers do not wear facial masks to conceal their identity, because that's not who MPD is and not what we stand for. And we, shout out to the unions as well, we did the meet and confer process that we are required to do by CBA, expedited that. Both unions were on board with those changes and waived their 30 days to hold that meet and confer, and we all agreed upon language that is now part of policy. Alderperson Zamaripa approached the department and said, hey, sick and injured persons, we want to add language to include a duty to render aid or call for aid, depending on your training from the police department, to injuries even caused by other law enforcement agents. And actually the language of our sick and injured covered that, because it's for all. So we clarified that with the memo, and we're able to work together on those changes. And I will say, for Alderman Brower's request to change our use of force policy, we 100% agree with the intent. As a department, our duty is to protect and serve this community above all else. And when the things in Minneapolis have unfolded and there are valid concerns about some of the actions that have been taken by federal law enforcement agents, we understand that, one, the Milwaukee Police Department does not operate like that, and two, we want to do everything in our power to protect our community, including our protesting community. But we can only speak for ourselves, and we don't have any power or control over the actions of another law enforcement agency. And so with that as the framework, I want to say we are here today to say, Alderman Brower, we as a department agree that the police department has a duty to attempt intervention, but we don't believe that SOP is the place that needs to be inserted, and here's why. Our policies govern our officers' individual behavior. When you put something to policy, these are the rules that each individual Joe Smith officer has to abide by. And we, if we put this into policy, are asking those officers individually to make these very big decisions on their own, without the Milwaukee Police Department being a part of that decision-making process. So for that, I say, we've already got some things in place. So one, body-worn cams. Our officers must have their body-worn cameras activated when they respond to calls for service. And we put out a reminder that this is really important if they encounter other law enforcement agents or agencies. So we've got that. A second directive we've implemented in recent months is we have requested that if officers respond to anything and there is another law enforcement agency present, they immediately call for a supervisor, because the executive command staff wants to know what is happening. And in those cases, the executive command staff wants to be part of that decision-making process on what the most appropriate action to take is. And if you put it in policy, that policy is not what directs the chief to do something. It's what an officer, Joe Smith, must do on the ground. And so our issue isn't an objection to the overall intent of what the council and what Alderman Brower wants to do. Our objection is, well, this isn't the place to insert that. And we agree that in these situations, and you know, each situation is different and unique, and there are a multitude of factors to consider. And different entities we would also need to consult, the district attorney's office, the local officials, sometimes even other agencies like the sheriff's office, because if we decide to intervene and say arrest, we need to ensure that there's a place to take a person. And so with all of that, that initial step to intervene, placing that responsibility solely on an officer by policy is problematic for us as a department, because those decisions need to be made from the very top. And so our objection is not to, again, the intent, but to a change in policy for those. Another thing I do want to point out for the department is our use of force policy is more restrictive than even other jurisdictions in Wisconsin, and in part thanks to the FPC. So chokeholds, for instance, is something that we cannot use by our policy, but a surrounding jurisdiction perhaps can, and that would not be considered excessive force. Another example is taser use. We have a requirement that the taser be used in the non-dominant hand, and that's unique to Milwaukee police officers and their training. And another difference and distinction is our use of less lethal munitions. So we do not use those during regular patrols. We only use those for very specific circumstances, but that doesn't ban other agencies from the ability to utilize less than lethal weapons in situations we cannot, including federal agents. So if, let's say, federal agents are using less than lethal, you know, OC spray or something that we don't use, to us, it may look excessive, that we need to intervene, but it might not be excessive in accordance with their policies and standards, and that's why we don't want our officers doing that on the ground. Split-second decision-making, we want those decisions to be made from their supervision instead. So, a lot of words. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but again, those are our objections.
Open it up for discussion. I mean, I'm happy to discuss it, I have it. So, I think one of the things that is troubling me is when you say a duty to intervene. I have, you know, from my experience, a concept of what that means in terms of MPD, which doesn't necessarily mean putting their hands on that officer. It might be verbal direction. It might be, as you say, calling a supervisor or doing something else. So I think there's a distinction between doing something that really is not an obstruction of what federal officers doing, and doing something that helps protect the citizen. And that would be with, you know, making it known this is you know, you don't need to do that, whatever. And also reporting it, also documenting it, also being prepared to be a witness. And I don't know that from the command staff, they can really make a decision on whether or not there's going to be any physical interference. I think that for department members, if they actually need to intervene with a fellow officer and they're not complying with a verbal, they may be able to do some physical activity there. Am I correct?
Yes, But utilizing the language duty to intervene without definition is problematic for our officers who are making those decisions. And I will say, you know, hey, you're gonna be a witness. Our officers have that awareness, and I think it's in other policies that's their role in all of the situations that they encounter where they're going to have to testify or they're going to have to, have their body worn cam available in discovery. And so that what we would need to explore is which policies cover those situations where there is, ensuring you're preserving evidence. And I believe I have so many policies, I don't know which one would cover that. I'm happy to bring that back to this body. But yes, intervention, all of our officers are able trained, for instance, and that could be a soft intervention, just a spoken word in some situations to their fellow officer and their coworkers. But the issue is, even with a soft intervention, we can't guarantee the actions of another law enforcement agency and how they might react to even that. And so that is why we prefer that any type of intervention be on the leadership level, and involvement on the leadership level to make those decisions. But yes, calling a supervisor is a form of intervention, so to speak, and we've already issued that directive. Where there's other law enforcement agencies, when you're responding to a call or an incident, immediately call a supervisor.
Comment more than a question. It's really critical that we sit down and talk to each other, so that the common council, Alderman Brower and somebody, but the other one, they understand what the police limitations are and abilities. I mean, so that we talk to each other, so that we don't, and we don't have to agree. We don't have to agree, but we understand what intervention means, right? We don't want any ugly situations where guns are pointing at each other, kind of thing. And there has to be, because we have to discuss this. We be prepared. I mean, I'm a child of immigrants. I got a family terrified to leave the house. So I understand the situation, but I understand from the police side also that we need to talk. We need to discuss this. We need to organize so that we understand what the police are going to do, what the common council wants the police to do, and what the Fire Police Commission wants our members to do. It's really important that we talk about this stuff and communicate. We don't have to agree, and we're not going to agree in everything. So that we understand what intervention means, and from the police side of it, and because if we start forcing things on each other, then we all lose. You got to be prepared for the worst or the best. Hope for the best, right? And that's why we got to talk to each other and be ready for whatever comes along. Nothing's probably going to happen until after the elections. It's the political reality. Nothing's going to happen till then, but this is happening, and we need to prepare. And let's communicate with each other so that we're on the same page, at least understanding each other, not condemning each other.
Okay, I see some hands up on the screen. Commissioner Evans, why don't you go ahead?
Madam Chair? Fair enough, it's really far away and it is hard to see. Fair play. So, yeah, I have a few things. One is I guess I'll start just quickly with a process issue. So when this body, prior to Act 12 and even post Act 12, like when we have taken up an issue of policy, like a policy question, we've been very, very deliberative, to the point it annoys people, but also I think it is an essential feature because police policy is really critical for officers understanding how to operate day to day. It has big implications. And so, like, I will just say now, like, I am absolutely not prepared to vote on this tonight. This is the first time I've seen this at an FPC meeting, and so, like, I have a lot of questions. I have more things I want to look into. So, and I know that the vote of this commission does not restrict the vote of the Common Council, and I think that's important to note as well. But So there's that process thing. I would at least like a communication file first, conversation, hearing about it, fact finding, and then potentially, even if we're moving very quickly, then maybe the next meeting that it comes up is the resolution. But I think first meeting being a resolution file is too fast for me. I want to say a few things too. So I think, we're not new to the bluster from law enforcement agencies when policy modifications are on the table. That's a thing. I learned a lot from the passage of SOP 575. I learned a lot about what people said was going to be a problem before and then after passage, and how different the environment was before and after. I mean, I didn't say at the time, I think it's important to say, like, we got threats from law enforcement agencies out in the city that said they wouldn't render aid in the city of Milwaukee if we passed that policy. It turned out to be complete bullshit, but we just call it what it is. But I think that, like, that's part of the bluster I'm kind of talking about. So I just want to name that. That makes it hard sometimes to, like, properly assess the pushback. What if it is real, what if it isn't? It's clear to me that one good thing about the ICE Out package is that it really demonstrates that the Common Council isn't thinking, and not just Common Council, our partners, like community partners, everybody, that, like, police are not the end all be all public safety. There is too much put on their shoulders, and there's too much expectation for what is possible for them to do. So I think, like, that's acknowledged by thinking about outside the box about, like, hey, ICE can't be staging on city land and, like, things like that. I think that's a really good thing. I also think the goal of this policy, I want to ask you about this, Alderman Brower, like, is to prevent Fed officers, like ICE agents and any Fed, from abusing, injuring, and killing Milwaukeeans extrajudiciously.
That's correct.
Yeah. I'm not sure that this as written gets us there, which is one of the reasons why, like, I think talking about it more, like, having time to be deliberative is important. I also think it's really important to say, like, policing in America isn't like, what police are allowed to do is way too permissible in this country. And it's built in with qualified immunity and all these other issues that we are not going to be able to fix with an SOP adjustment. And so, like, I think that's a really hard thing, like, figuring out, like, it is both infuriating. It is always infuriating, actually. Let me adjust that. It is infuriating. But figuring out, like, what is the proper lever to pull at an SOP level is, like, one of the questions I have for something like this. And I really want to be clear that I'm not at all worried that MPD officers are going to over-intervene on the feds. That is not a worry that I have. I'm not worried about MPD holding too many officers accountable and disciplining the heck out of them because of this policy being put in place. That is also not a concern I have. I do have some, like, practical questions, which are, like, what will happen with our Milwaukee area investigative team mate agreements? The city of Milwaukee has a higher use of force standard than the DOJ, than the national standard. That's a good thing about Milwaukee, but it does, the chokehold question is, like, a really good one, because they're not allowed here under any circumstance. The DOJ use of force allows it when deadly force is allowable. That's a really different policy. What does that mean? I think this could be a broader question about how the city wants to deal with this stuff, but there's also federal partnerships that exist now in the city with the HIDA program, the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, with the Fusion Center. Like, there are other ways that there's partnership happening between the police department and the feds. So, like, what would a policy like this, how would it impact? I've also got a couple of, like, this is already in the policy. This isn't something you guys added. It's already in there that talks about how statute numbers shall reasonably attempt to intervene to prevent the use of such excessive force if the observing officer is in a position to do so, ideally before the situation escalates, and then this is the part I want to emphasize, and if any such intervention does not jeopardize safety. And I think, like, there's, like, a loophole built into the policy in that way, because as we know, a primary driving factor of guilt or innocence for officers is whether they personally felt that they were in jeopardy. So around, so the things you point out, Heather, about like, and I don't mean to be too informal.
No.
Jesus, that's all. About body worn cameras being on, like, I like that that's being emphasized, that calling supervising, all that's fine, but it in no way will do the thing that the Common Council is trying to get done, which is to prevent, at the point of violence and damage, have intervention. And so, I guess I just wanted to name that and say, I think some kind of policy that could help us get there is a good idea. I just don't think we're there yet, in terms of like, if you're asking me, which you are, because I'm a fire and police commissioner, so that's where I'm at with it. Yeah.
Madam Chair? Sure. I think it's really important that we understand the gravity of the situation that we're in right now. I think it's clear, Alderman Brower, based on sort of where you said the intent of this policy came from these extreme cases like Renee Good, like Alex Preddy, that people are already being sort of extrajudicially murdered in the streets. And so I consider that heavily when I am looking at this recommendation. Like, these are not hypothetical situations. They have already happened. People have already been murdered. And even though that hasn't happened in Milwaukee, and I do not want it to happen in Milwaukee, it weighs on me heavily, the idea that it could happen in Milwaukee. I think one thing that I'm really struggling with is the critique that we can't entrust our officers to do split-second decision-making. I think we already entrust our officers to make split-second decisions that are life or death decisions all the time, and that is a part of their job. I understand that there is no way for them to know sort of what is in a federal law enforcement officer's head, but there's also no way for them to know what is in a fellow law enforcement officer's head or in a subject that they're chasing down's head. So I think in a lot of ways we are already asking our officers to make those types of decisions a lot of the time, and I think to Chair Horowitz's point, it doesn't seem practical to me for the determination to be sort of with command staff that are away from the scene, especially in a situation that is tense or rapidly evolving. Our officers are already making these dynamic decisions all the time. I guess based on what you said earlier, Alderman Brower, it doesn't seem like the intent of your recommendation is such that MPD officers would like follow ICE around all the time and see if they're doing something a little bad. It would be to give them clear instructions in sort of the most egregious of situations. But I will note that our sort of potential liabilities around use of force decisions and like potential loss of life, like those already exist in day-to-day policing all of the time, so that's not new. I understand that this is a new process to us in Milwaukee, and so that requires kind of all of us to sit down and work out the kinks together, I think. I noticed that in the file that there are documents related to what's happening in Cook County, and I was wondering, Alderman Brower, if you can just elaborate on sort of what is happening over there and the determination that it's sort of law enforcement's responsibility to at least collect and document evidence and maybe potentially investigate in some way. I know we've been talking about the intervention part a lot. I just wanted to talk about the investigation concept.
If I may, Madam Chair, thank you. Yeah, no, I really appreciate bringing it up, Commissioner. So what's in the file is a Chicago Tribune article, which the headline being prosecutor circulates policy outlining process for charging federal immigration agents, and then also the other document in the file is the actual Cook County State's Attorney, which is their version of a district attorney, in Illinois, Federal Immigration Enforcement Action Response Protocol. And these are the article from the Chicago Tribune is dated February 20th, and the document is approved, was approved on February 19th of this year. So with this, they're just outlining that their intent to that they have prosecutorial duties, that that they do need to, the duty includes, so they're outlining here that the Illinois Rules of Professional Conduct, which I'm assuming we have something similar or kin, includes the duty to seek justice and refrain from prosecuting a charge that the prosecutor knows is not supported by a probable cause, and they, refrain from making extrajudicial comments, and so they're just outlining this here, and they also, outlining the conditions under which they would bring charges, and then additionally just outlining the fact that I pointed out in a previous comment earlier that under the supremacy clause, a federal officer is only granted immunity when the officer did no more than what was necessary and proper for them to do so, and that's cited in the document as Kentucky versus Long and Wyoming versus Livingston. And so I guess, to your question, one of the things that I think they're outlining is that there is opportunity should there be an egregious use of force or a murder or something of that nature that is a criminal action by an ICE agent, that there is some grounds, granted limited because of the supremacy clause, but there is some grounds for prosecution of an ICE agent by a local, by a DA. And so that's why I put those things in the file, because I wanted to demonstrate, and this was based on, I believe, some back and forth between the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and Mayor Brandon Johnson's office about whether they should or shouldn't prosecute. And so that's what this is, that's just kind of what this outlines, that there is precedent in other jurisdictions for there to be some kind of standard that's being established under which they can prosecute.
May I just add, I do want to put on the record the distinction between this guidance from a district attorney versus a policing policy. So this is distinct in that it is a legal opinion and it's guidance from the district attorney to say, here's how you need to get to this type of charge. Our policy is distinct and different from that.
Sure, of course. I just think it's helpful for me because I hate to use this word because it's so tiring, we're in such unprecedented times, all of us, that it's just helpful for me to know sort of what are any legal opinions or any possible avenues to protect people that are happening nationwide, whether that's in Cook County or in Philly. Thank you for getting into that a little bit in a little bit more detail. I think I am open to, I guess, further conversation if there are language tweaks that sort of need to be worked out. But in terms of the intent here, I do think that this moment in history calls on us to be brave, and because we are in an unprecedented situation, in some cases, we will be, whether it's the Common Council or the FPC, if anyone wants to take any action, these actions will be sort of new things that may be a little bit difficult to work out. But I just want to note that I think it's really important that we take them seriously and somewhat urgently, and that we figure out how to work them out.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at this from through a variety of lenses. The issue of personal liability on a police officer is something that weighs heavily on me. And I'm not sure how we get around that in an SOP. Actually, to me, that's a city policy that needs to be figured out. Are we going to take on that liability and actually find ways to waive that liability for the individual police officer? We don't necessarily do that in an SOP. That's a different vehicle in my mind. Not sure what it looks like, but it's a different vehicle. And whether or not the citizens of Milwaukee have an appetite to take on that additional liability, it's a bigger discussion. I'm not suggesting that we not do anything, we have to do something, but I'm not sure it can all be covered in the SOP. I wish I could give you greater guidance on that, but I think it's something that we have to do a little bit of studying on to figure out what multitude of steps need to be taken to protect our citizens who disagree with something that is coming down from the federal level.
And I also just want to add something to the facts that we know, based on media reports. We know that in the two situations where individuals lost their lives, the local police department wasn't there. And in those circumstances, even whether we had an SOP change or not, and if the exact same things happened here, there wasn't an opportunity to intervene because local law enforcement wasn't a part of those two situations. What we have seen, and what the chief has gathered from a lot of different jurisdictions, is that local police are on scene when, say, there are protests occurring, and impromptu protests, when federal law enforcement agencies are conducting, different types of activities in spaces. And in those cases, we have the ability to de-escalate situations based on our normal protocol that we utilize in all types of protest situations here in Milwaukee, and we've navigated that space quite well in the past. So I put that out there to say the police department is reluctant to make a policy change that makes no guarantees to prevent the situations that happen in Minneapolis here. And also, we are concerned about our individual officers and, the responsibility it imposes on them to then understand and navigate these situations in a bubble. So that was just a distinction I wanted to make.
Any other commissioners? Well, procedurally, we have this, was there any? No. Procedurally, we have this before us as a resolution, but I agree with Vice Chair that I'm not prepared to vote on it because it's the first time we've been approached with it, and I think we would entertain a motion to, well, let me ask this. What would you see as the next appropriate step?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we can hold this over, because this hasn't gone through a committee, right?
No, it hasn't.
It's come directly to
Yeah.
the full commission. In my mind, I don't want to table it because that makes no sense. It would essentially kill it, but I want to drive conversation on this. And so I'm trying to figure out.
Well, we could hold it with the call of the chair, and then we can figure out a strategy to work on it. It may be that the staff should take a whack at drafting something, whether it's a SOP change or a memorandum or something that gives clear guidance to officers to what they should do if they're confronted with these situations. So, but I can't make the motion. Is there a motion?
I can offer a few examples of possible paths forward here, if that's helpful. So procedurally, as you indicated, Madam Chair, you could do a motion to hold this to the call of the chair and then take it up at the next meeting. The intent behind that doesn't have to be to just delay for delay's sake. It can be so you or the vice chair or any other commissioner can consult with staff and ask FPC staff to draft something, to do further research, get additional information, anything that you think would be helpful to come back at the next meeting or subsequent meeting and make it a more informed choice. In my humble opinion, I think that is an eminently reasonable course of action and not inappropriate. You could refer it to a committee, like the Oversight and Accountability Committee, which meets next Tuesday. I would say that one consideration is if you want to keep this before the entire board versus a group of 4 or 5 individual commissioners to do the heavy lifting. You would also likely take additional time since these committees meet only every other month, and I don't know that they're going to be in a position to make a substantive decision on Tuesday any more than you are here today. So, I mean, that's just a consideration regarding that. If you were to make a substantive motion, which again, I think there's reasonable considerations that would weigh against doing that potentially. I mean, really, I see 3 broad options. A motion recommending passage, a motion recommending passage with some changes, that can take a lot of forms, or a motion recommending against passage. Again, I agree that it would be certainly a reasonable position to hold this to get additional information in order to weigh options even for a reasonable period of time.
Okay, that being said, you now all know what motion is possible, and if you want to make one.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
My hope is that there is enough dialogue between the sponsors of the resolution with the city attorney's office to figure out those really big issues that are going to come back to us without resolution, really making any sort of action we take sort of meaningless, because it's going to get caught up in this whole discussion on whether or not the bodies that are going to be involved in driving this can do any policy change with a level of fidelity that will make the public happy. That's my issue with this. There being lack of options, I'm going to make a motion to hold at the chair's discretion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion to hold to the call of the chair in a second. I guess we'll take a voice vote.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I think what would help me understand how to vote is if we had a time when we were expecting to hear this back on the agenda. So is that, and I would recommend it be in 1 week, or not 1 week, just in 2 weeks when our next meeting is, or one of the meetings in April.
Oh, yeah.
Can we put that on? Is that okay?
But friendly amendment, yes.
Well, I guess.
But it's up to the chair.
Yeah, I don't think you really need to put it into the motion.
Okay.
I think you know that, first of all, I have every intention of acting on it quickly. Second of all, if I fail to do that, our rules allow any 2 commissioners to add to the agenda or to call a special meeting. So, I don't think that.
Madam Chair, can I also ask a procedural question that will help inform my vote? Is common council action on this item actually held up by our decision for recommendation, or this is a separate process?
It is my understanding that while it's not at present required, the chair of the Public Safety and Health Committee, Alderman Spiker, requested that this be referred to FPC to make a recommendation before his committee takes action. So they are requesting a recommendation that That doesn't prevent them from moving forward concurrently, but my expectation is that that will not happen, and they'll be waiting for you to act. To make a recommendation, I should say.
Okay, so good news there. Do we have any other discussion on the motion to hold to the college? Okay, then I will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much for coming, Alderman, and we will certainly be hearing from us. Yes. Thank you. Director, please proceed with the agenda so we can do that.
Now the items on the consent agenda. After I do, any commissioner may remove any items from the regular agenda for discussion or appropriate action. Items not removed may be